Hi everyone, I am Colin Davis and I have my partner Melissa Mari with me tonight.
Hi there.
And we are the creators of the film V is for Virus. And so tonight what we're going to do is we're just going to have a little conversation amongst ourselves. Basically, we've pulled some of the questions down that we've posed to others from our website, and we're going to get into those questions ourselves as a way to break into some of this material. So let us start with just a basic question of what is this film about and why are you making it?
Well, this has already been quite a journey for us. We feel like it's our personal grail quest to investigate the destructive nature of the universe in order to heal ourselves. I can speak for myself. I come from quite a traumatic background, and my whole life has been about healing that. We're also artists, so how we go about things tends to be what we call in a life art sort of a way. So this information we have been studying, and it's been coming to us, and it's all we've been focused on for the last year and a half about. And we're passionate and obsessed about it, basically.
Right. And so let me break that apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the same thing goes for me, basically. What we're finding is pretty much everybody in this society is fairly heavily traumatized. I mean, as a society, we're all kind of walking around with PTSD, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so basically a big part of my quest has been, just like you, is to heal myself and to get in touch with the repressed emotions, repressed energy that has been steering me in a direction that I'd rather it not steer me, right? And the more we did this investigation, this therapy on and amongst ourselves, the more this art that we're creating now came out as part of the therapy. And so basically, this movie is about our investigation into our own dark side, and then it's our investigation into the dark side of our society. And then it's our investigation into the dark or the destructive side of the universe, right? And so we're basically using a tool. It's a concept called holarchy. And basically it describes the modular or fractal-like nature of the organization of the universe. And then we're going to jump from different holons, different areas of organization, and explore how the destructive force in the universe works in those areas. So whether that's on the cellular level, like for example with viruses, or whether that's on the cosmological level, with this concept of entropy, whether it's on the personal level and how we destroy ourselves from the inside out, from the societal level, how we harm ourselves societally. And so we're just basically going to jump around the map, and then we're going to correlate what we find with itself. We're going to try to extrapolate what we've learned in these certain areas, and then we're going to try to put together a map, and we're going to try to take what we've learned in one area and apply it to another. And so the end goal here is to be able to understand why we're self-destructive, understand how that destructive coding passes on amongst human beings, understand how that destructive coding passes on through the universe, and what can we do to manage it. Because we've already gotten to the point to where we understand that there's no way to banish evil. There's no way to banish the destructive force in the universe. It's only about management. And at all these other levels of organization in the universe, like for example, on the cellular level or molecular level, these aspects of the universe have already figured out ways to manage this destructive force. And so, but as human beings, we're really just now maturing into a stage where we're able to really even deal with it.
Yeah, we feel that this investigation is actually just a beginning of what we feel should be a new scientific investigation, just like the investigations into creation.
Right.
It's just as important. It's
Yeah.
so vast,
Right.
but it stays in the shadows.
Right, exactly.
No one wants to go to the dark side. No one wants to. I guess because we both have experience in metal music, and with Colin with death metal or extreme metal, it's like we've never been afraid to go into the dark side. So we're
Well,
willing
in
to
an
go
artistic
there.
way, at least.
Yes, so we're willing to go there. I actually have gone into it in my own personal life, kind of what I thought was out
Right.
of my, but that's a whole nother story. But needless to say, this is very important, we feel.
Yeah, it's that, I mean, I don't think anyone would really ask, why do you, well, what's the problem here? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what the problem is. I mean, we're Americans, and from our point of view, just looking at the state of our society right now, it's falling apart, and it's getting more and more destructive. There are fewer and fewer people who are truly happy in our society. I mean, I can just go anywhere in public and just watch parents just everywhere abusing their children. I can watch the government abusing the citizens. I can watch just the way the society is operated and run right now. It's extremely abusive to the people. And then the people are extremely abusive to each other and to themselves. And it's not just an accident. It's not just there is a whole science. There is a whole mechanism to how the universe destroys itself and why. It's part of the evolutionary process. This destructive force is tied right into the evolutionary force. It is actually an impetus. It is a force which actually causes evolution. You actually can't have evolution unless you have this entropic force, this destructive force. And we're usually okay with looking at it. Let's say we're scientists and we're looking at molecular biology, or we're astronomers and we're looking at supernovas and black holes. We're okay with that. But then when you see it on this human social level, as war, as disease, as abusive actions by people, it's then it becomes personal. It gets heart-wrenching, and then you want to turn away. And so we feel that if we can study this in these different holons, then we can understand it better, and then we can take what we've learned without having to, we don't have to constantly just keep looking at how bad it is for human beings. We can look at how this works in all these other places in the universe, and then we can extrapolate from there.
Okay, so speaking of that, the first question that we have on our website, viasforvirus.com, which has all these questions, because we do want to start a conversation, and we will be inviting experts in all these different fields to have a conversation with us, and some of them actually be interviewed in the movie itself.
Right.
So the first question is, how can we learn from other life forms such as cells and from physical matter itself,
Right.
which has already evolved to manage the caustic force of entropy?
Right. So I was already sort of getting into that, basically saying that we can study how viruses work in biology. We can study how the force of entropy is, it's, in physics it's called the second law of thermodynamics, or at least that applies very closely to this principle of entropy. So we can study it in physics and these material sciences. We're looking at it in cosmology. We're looking at it how black holes work, for example, right? So it's not something that I can answer right now. It's part of the investigation. We just know that if we go investigate these other areas, we can then apply that to the human social holon. And so, I could go on about, my personal view and stuff, but I think right now we should just put that out there, that that's what we're doing.
Right. So then the next question is, how does our civilization traumatize us all, creating core emotional wounds which are sources of social destruction, and how can we heal them?
Right. This is one that I've been on recently, and if you, first of all, you're never going to have a situation, you're never going to have a society where everything is just running perfect all the time and it's all about evolution and life and there's no dysfunction. You're never going to have that. But our society, our civilization, which is now worldwide really, which is it's patriarchal in nature, has particular types of dysfunction that are sort of unique to our civilization. And if we go back into the mythology, if we go back into the religious scripture, if we go back into the customs and culture of the past, we can see this signature coding, you could say. And one of the, at least it appears to us, that one of the most caustic, destructive pieces of coding here, you could say, it has to do with the victim-victor, the victim-aggressor relationship, and the phenomenon of abandonment, emotional abandonment, is what it becomes. And you can basically see how that in our society we have built it. It's okay, in order to have the kind of society that we have, it's hierarchical, it's top down in its organization, and basically in order to be able to have the control of that civilization at the top and then have all of the masses basically following the orders, on a need-to-know basis, you could say, you have to have some methods for organizing that and keeping that together. And one of the things that is really the most effective is fear, right? And so, because fear is one of our most primal, oldest emotions, and it's very hard to have a conscious effect over fear. And so if you can thoroughly scare people enough through whatever means, you can pretty much force them into whatever direction socially you want them to go into. And what we see is that in our society, this is a key tool that's used. And basically, like one of the things that I've done recently is to go back into the Genesis story, back into the Adam and Eve story, back into Cain and Abel, and look and see how the God of the Old Testament, in that context, was not just a loving creator God, but he was also very destructive. And this is not to say that our destructive code comes from the Bible or comes from Christianity or comes from Judeo-Christianity. It's just that you can find this code sort of embedded into it.
This is something, one part that we want to investigate is experts in in religion
Right. Yeah.
and myth.
Exactly. We would like to compare how this victim aggressor circumstance, this victim aggressor formula, and emotional abandonment is sort of how that becomes a core feature of our civilization and of patriarchy. But it's very deep. But just to sum it up really quick here is that in if you go back to that story, you can see how basically what happened when Adam and Eve were trying to grow up and trying to explore and trying to become adults, basically, is that God basically said, "Don't do that, and if you do that, I'm going to abandon you forever." And then when their children, Cain and Abel, tried to please their spiritual father, he said, "I will accept this from you, but I will not accept that. I will accept a blood sacrifice from Abel, but I will not accept this sacrifice of fruits," is what it was, from Cain. And it was basically emotional abandonment. And then what Cain did basically is he projected his anger out and murdered his brother. And then God said, "Okay, I'm further going to punish you. No compassion for you. You're marked forever. You're out of favor completely." This story is basically it's just one little snapshot of the this emotional abandonment code, and then it's been carried on all out throughout history on up to now, and we still have this very aggressive, angry kind of way of dealing with our children. And then that becomes repressed energy, and then we use that repressed energy to fuel the society. And then we pass on this broken code to each other. And so this is like one snapshot that shows the destructive aspect of our civilization and how it's tied itself into the foundations of the civilization, and how that it's become a core feature which does propel our civilization but wounds us and turns us into victims, into casualties of this civilization.
Okay, so going into the next one,
A little long-winded, but
which so this I think I'm very fascinated with. Are there agents of destruction which are unseen to our perception, and can we determine their existence? So, in our own investigation, we have found that we feel this exists, and there's a couple other people that we want to mention that have investigated this. Not too many, but I think that the unseen is, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing this investigation, because just as in quantum physics, you can't see
no,
anything.
you have to just
These unseen forces, or the forces of destruction, we feel that there's something behind it. There's an energy system behind it which operates. And in Gnostic texts, they talk about archons, and there's some experts we'd like to get in who understand about what archons are. But anyway, so you can continue on that one.
Okay. So as far as that core force, right? That's what we could call entropy, or what has been being called evil for a long, long time. That is definitely what's behind all destructiveness. There is a primal universal force, just like there's a force of creation, there's a force of destruction. So that's for sure. But it's like in the realm of the seen, we can see okay, human beings or other living creatures, right, or plants or anything that's living, we can look at them and we can say, oh, okay, these are the products of creation. Even if we believe that it was that a being, God, created these creatures in one fell swoop, or if we believe that it was a long-term incremental climb, there is this creation force, right? And so we're very familiar with this creation force, but that destruction force is also there, and it is also fueling living systems as well. And so just as though we're being fueled by this creative force, there are living systems or systems of organization, maybe in unseen realms, that are more shifted towards the negative polarity, and that they're basically getting their sustenance off of pulling things apart. They get their energy from ripping other things down. And I mean, it's an interesting fact that I only learned recently that 2/3 of life forms on the planet are considered parasitic. And organisms are either parasitic, or they are predatory, or they are symbiotic, right? And so the question is, are there energetic systems, whether you would consider them to be alive or not, that are in the unseen realms, that are basically a part of our lives, and that are getting their own energetic sustenance from our evolutionary force, from our life force? Well, we know that tapeworms get inside of our guts. We know that parasites get inside of us, right? I mean, little biological parasites, right? But what about in the other areas of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see? Are they there? And they were always referred to in mythology, right? And then, are they also inside of our emotional systems? Well, first of all, what are our emotional systems, right? I mean, how does that work? They're energy systems. Are they inside of us? Is that where they are? I mean, where are they? And are they also in our emotional systems? Is that a habitat for predatory or parasitic organisms, you could call them, that they may not be biological? And have they woven their life cycle into ours? And we're finding that we believe that is the case.
Yeah, we've done a lot of personal investigation into this as part of our healing work on ourselves. And I've come to the personal conclusion that they very much are real. Mm-hmm. Just think about the little voice, like say you're addicted to sugar or addicted to anything, and you're doing your best not to take that, not to eat any sugar, but mm-hmm. there's this little voice that talks to you just mm-hmm. out of the blue, mm-hmm. that comes and says, no, come on, just that one little bite of that brownie. It's not going to hurt you. But these kinds of things, if you start watching your own mind, you start to notice that these things happen all the time. But I did want to mention Jonathan Zapp. If you Google mind parasites, there's only a couple people that come up. Colin Wilson, who we had heard about his book about 6 months after we started figuring this out for ourselves. And then it's only 2 months ago I started reading it, and it was virtually identical to what we have come across.
Yeah, supposedly it was fiction.
Supposedly it was fiction. We would really like to interview his son at some point.
Yeah.
And then when you Google it, the only other person that comes up is Jonathan Zapp.
Right.
And he has really done some good investigation into it, and had his own personal experiences, and he's somebody else we'd like to chat with.
And then of course there's Paul Levy.
Right, who
Right.
we
So
already had
Paul,
interviewed.
and right, we did interview Paul Levy before, and of course Paul is definitely, we're going to ask him to be in the film. But so Paul's concept is I mean, so Paul is one of the only people out there that I know that has really tried to do an in-depth investigation into this destructive force as it operates throughout humanity. And he uses the Cree Indian term Wetiko, which means like evil spirits, which can take you over. And he also, like us, relates this force to viruses. It seems to manifest in a virus-like way. And Paul's investigation into the Wetiko virus, I think, is fantastic, and it's very deep. And I definitely recommend that everybody read his book if they're interested in this. But what we want to do is we want to take Paul's investigation and we want to zoom out a little bit more. We want to go into these other holons, and we want to try to just do a more in-depth investigation in other areas of the universe. But when Paul talks about this Wetiko virus, this parasite basically, that infects all of us and has its own life cycle, and that it will feed itself off of an individual or through relationships. When you really start to look at your own thoughts, at your own emotional responses, you really start to try to not just write it off and say, okay, I'm a little neurotic, I'm a little self-destructive, that's just me. You have to realize this is happening to all of us. We're all getting self-destructive thoughts constantly all the time.
I would call it also disharmonious thoughts,
Yeah,
too.
disharmonious thoughts. And what we're finding is that this whole destructive internal dialogue, which, like, okay, for example, schizophrenics are like on the far end of this. But at least in our investigation, it seems to always source itself from an emotional wound.
And
So
that,
we go
yeah.
back to the abandonment code, right? And we're all, I mean, I didn't really get into this. I'll have to get into it in another video. We're all abandoned emotionally by our parents and by our society because of the nature of the civilization. But we all manifest wounds in slightly different ways. But that wound and other wounds seem to be the source of where these destructive entities, if you want to call them that, where they tap into. And they will always try to get you to do something, think something, or perform some action that will make you fall down, that will make you reopen the wound. And then when that happens, they get their energetic sustenance. And so that's sort of part of how the Wetiko virus, as Paul calls it, how it works. And that whole area is a huge part of our investigation.
Yes. So how can we manage the force of entropy evil in our own lives by raising our own consciousness, as so many other levels of life and matter have already done? Mm-hmm. So in our own personal investigations, what we have done, which seems to be helping us learn how to manage it, and this is also a big subject, is that we've been going into ourselves, that part that you talked about earlier, the coding, the abandonment coding, our own personal trauma. And the more we shed light on that, we call it illuminate it, it allows us to get to the root of it. A good way to start is when you get upset with something outside of yourself, there is a really good chance that that's actually, I would say, a guarantee that it's something that is coming from you.
Yeah, if something outside of you charges you, gets you emotionally charged, you can be assured that that's because that relates to energy that you have repressed.
Exactly. We have another website called livinginthemovie.com, and that's like our light side, and this is where we get into all this other information about co-creating your reality. But we also understand that without really understanding the dark side, the destructive nature in ourselves and on all these different whole on levels, we're not going to be good co-creators.
No,
No.
you can't even do it.
So what we've been doing so far is myself, I've been going way deep into that trauma. I call it my whole, or the painful parts. The deeper you go into your repressed emotional body, the deeper the pain. I know that some people will have less, some people have more, but it doesn't matter. It's still very painful. But once you illuminate that, what happens when you don't push it away and you just accept it, you just allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to cry, to be angry, to feel fear, but fully engage it.
Right.
What you find is that it allows more space in your overall mind-body system to ventilate, to have more space.
Yeah.
And then it allows more energy to come through your body.
Right. And then you'll notice that those things that once charged you externally don't charge you anymore.
Right.
And then the magical part of it is not just that you won't be charged by those things that once charged you, but that you will not manifest those situations anymore. You will actually end up modifying your external reality by illuminating and integrating your repressed emotional energy.
Right. So again, this is a really big area for investigations. There's some experts in emotional body healing.
John Ruskin.
John Ruskin.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
John Wellwood.
Yeah, John Wellwood. Gabor Mate. Who we'd really like to interview because they really have a deep understanding of this repressed emotional body. And
Right.
also Eckhart Tolle
Oh yeah.
has a good synopsis of what he calls the pain body is
Right.
the same thing as what we are calling the parasite.
Yeah, like Paul Levy uses the term wetiko to refer to this destructive system inside of us or between all of us. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. We just call it our parasites, or the virus.
Or the virus, because we've found that there's, in ourselves, we've looked at different ones, and we call, and Carlos Castaneda, Don Juan, they call them flyers.
Right.
And we call them mosquitoes, and those are those little thought forms that just come into your head and just are these wacky, destructive thought forms that don't have anything to do with anything you're doing, but they just are destructive.
Yeah, seem not to.
Yes, seem not to. So there's a lot of information that we would like to put together and uncover. And it just...
So that was, what was that question again?
This was about entropy and evil, how to manage the
how
force.
to manage it.
Yeah, and raise our consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you said it all. That's it. I mean, that's basically, that's a chunk of our management practice for ourselves. We know that that ritual has always been, all the way back through before this civilization, through the Neolithic, Paleolithic times and all of this, there were, ritual was a method for integrating and transmuting this negative, destructive energy in us, and basically ritual to a large degree has left our lives, at least for those purposes. It's interesting because I have this background in heavy metal music, and in heavy metal music, and especially the extreme metal music, they have this thing called the mosh pit, and it's actually a friendly kind of aggressive ritual where where usually young men basically push themselves around to the energy of the music as a way to transmute their destructive energy. And it's interesting because if you go into that field of, especially really extreme metal music, you'll find that the people are always really nice, and
Nicest people,
nicest people,
metalheads.
metalheads. There's never
Yeah.
any fights and
Right.
stuff like that, or very rarely, and that's because they have a method for looking at and for integrating their repressed negative energies. But so that's one management practice. I mean, that's essentially ritual, right there.
Yeah, we'd like to actually find some shamans who are experts in dark ritual.
Right,
Actually,
exactly.
We would like to find them.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to make more videos on this whole thing because we do have our own sort of methodology that we're developing about emotional processing and stuff. Okay, go right ahead.
So this kind of is what we already are talking about. How can we support each other as we shift into a global society and develop management practices to deal with our destructive nature?
Yeah. I mean, so there it's like, okay, it's coming more and more into our consciousness, no matter what society we live in, that we're building a global community. I mean, of course, there's all sorts of political movements which are either for or against that, and there's all sorts of conversations about whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing or whatever. But whatever, it's happening. And if you use the concept of holarchy actually as a guide, you can see the sort of order of operations in some ways. And you can see that basically the planet is humanity's evolution is planetary evolution. And either humanity is either going to become sort of a much more coherent system, or it's going to break down into its constituent parts. It's either going to break down and dissolve and take a left turn and do something different, or it's going to come together as a species. But the thing is that there's no way that humanity can come together as a species. There's no way we can have an equitable economic system. There's no way we can have, any of the things that transportation, politics, any things that tie us together, if we're so ignorant about the destructive side of our own nature. Because look at the last century alone. On one hand, there's there's all this talk about how advanced we are and all of the optimism that came out of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, and we're going to eradicate disease and we're going to solve our problems with poverty and with food production and blah, 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 all thanks to technology and, the wonders of technology and chemicals and all this kind of stuff. Well, the 20th century was the most socially violent century of known history. There's a term called democide, which basically means death by government. And if you add up the casualties of these political policies by people like Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and these types of people, and you add them up, there's one professor that did this, you come to over 260 million people who were murdered just in the last 100 years, and that doesn't even include war. Right. So the last century was extremely destructive, and so it's like there's all this optimism about the future that was coming on through the 20th century, while at the same time we're just murdering ourselves.
Yeah,
and so we have no, I mean, okay, so just a little bit more here. So psychology as we know it is fairly new, right? And the concepts that Freud and Jung put forward and all that really got us in touch with the so-called shadow, right? And we started to really start to learn something about our own dark nature that we repress. But still, from our point of view, it's still so badly understood. There's no way we can have a constructive, coherent, global civilization to any degree if we don't understand why we're killing ourselves like that and what are the inherent properties in our civilization that lead us to these behaviors.
Right, because it's pretty obvious to us. We both woke up after 9/11.
Yeah.
And so we understand perfectly well the dark side.
Yeah.
Colin has studied it quite a bit.
And pick your conspiracy. Every one of them has something underlying it, no matter what your version of the story is, that is basically shows you how this destructive force will manifest from underground, from underneath the consciousness of the society, and will manifest itself into these events. And they are just going to keep on going.
Right. So what we're saying is that there has to be a way to understand the force behind all this, learn how it operates, learn how it works, so then we can learn how to manage it in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, and then in the outer world.
Right. You could say it's a branch of psychology that needs to develop, or it's a branch of sociology that needs to develop. It's also a branch of material sciences and all of these other sciences.
That's why we're saying
the destructive side of the universe is a whole, area in all of these different specializations that needs to be addressed more fully.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
So there's one more question.
Mm-hmm.
How are we each creating the social destruction we see rising so rapidly with our own internal wounding, which is being projected out onto the world stage? I think you already got into that.
You talked. We both kind of did.
Yeah.
But maybe we should just bring up our concept of living in the movie right now as a way to do that?
Yeah.
You want to do that?
Well, again, without understanding the dark nature and what's behind it, and this force and these energy systems on all these different holons, I don't believe that we can fully live in the movie.
Okay.
But
can you explain what that means?
Living in the movie.
Mm-hmm. So that's our other website, right?
Yeah.
livinginthemovie.com. And that concept, living in the movie, what does that mean?
I think that you should explain that, because it's basically a way of living what we call life art, creating your own life art, using the movie analogy. And you can go into that.
Okay. So real briefly in this one, living in the movie is a concept that basically it's a metaphor, and I mean this is all we really have is metaphors, is symbols that we use to understand our own perception, our own state of being, right? Because you can never really know something in its entirety because you're just looking at it from one little angle, from your personal perspective with your limited senses and all of this. But so it's a metaphor, and it basically takes the concept of how a movie is filmed, is created, processed, and how it's shown on a projection screen, how a movie is made that you go watch in the theater. You can use this to understand how we create our own reality. And so in in the movie creation process, you start with a camera, and the camera has some film in it that has a light-sensitive emulsion, right? A light-sensitive layer on it, and you expose it to a scene, expose it to light, and then what is encoded in that film is a version, a facsimile of what was in that scene. And then you take that film, you process it, and you play it back through a projector, and then it projects light out of the film onto a movie screen. So you go into the movie theater and you're looking on the screen, and you're watching this movie unfold for you. And depending on how well the movie is put together and the story and all of the aspects of it, it totally compels you, or it can. And you can lose yourself in the movie and just sort of forget that you're even watching a movie. Well, in the same way, our lives unfold in this way. And, we could just get so involved in the movie and forget that we're in it and forget that we actually have control over it. Because in a movie theater, if you just look behind you, you'll see that there is a projector room and that there is a light shining through the film and that is the source. Well, in this analogy, the light would be the light of your consciousness. And we have to kind of go into sort of a spiritual domain to really get into this. But you could say that light is your higher self or your soul or whatever term you want to use. And then it shines through the film. And the film is your psyche. It's your mind-body system. It's all of the coding that you have either in your body physically or what's encoded in your DNA, and it's all of the coding that you pick up when you grow up as a child and you are sucking in all of this information and making these determinations and putting meaning on things, and all of this gets encoded into your psyche, into your emotional system, into your mental system, into your brain, right? And so these are the layers of film or coding that our light of our consciousness projects through. And then what we see on the other side is what we call our lives, right? So our lives are not actually something that's separate from our internal state. Our lives, what we see in our external world, the stories that play out, are the end result of our consciousness shining through our mind-body system. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't an objective world, that there isn't something outside of our bodies, that there aren't other people or other aspects that are contributing to our movies of life. But it's that if I were to take this piece of paper and say, what does this look like? You would say, you'd have to say, well, what apparatus are you using to look at it? Right? Because the human eyeball can only see a small piece of the electromagnetic spectrum. If you could see in the infrared domain or microwave domain or something like that, this would look completely different. So what we call reality, what we call an objective reality, is really the version of that reality that we're able to perceive, right? And the thing is that if we will become aware of this process, these processes that are going on inside of us, if we will become aware of the coding, of the language, of the formulas, of the in film production that it's actually, there's so many words that line up here, but it's the emulsion. Emulsion is what gets is what picks up the light on a piece of film. Well, it's like our emotion, our emotional system is what stores, some of what stores all of this coding. And then our consciousness is viewed through that. So by coming to terms with what we are, with our energetic systems to a much greater degree, we can basically, by changing our internal state, we can change what happens in our external reality, right?
Right. Now, again, getting back to the virus, without actually illuminating and going into the self and finding where you have blocks, where we have blocked energy,
or where there's a destructive process going on.
yeah, where there's repressed emotional trauma,
Where there's cyclical wounding going on.
you can better believe, at least this has been our experience, is that the virus will come in, or these energy systems, these disharmonious energy systems will come in and feed off of it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And then what you see in your movie, that's the term we always use, our lives, our outer lives as we know them, that's our movie. What manifests in your movie is directly related to those energetic systems. It's already related to everything that's going on here. You have the life that you created, right? But you didn't know how you created it, by what means, because we don't generally understand what we're made of energetically. Right. But also the traumatic things that happen in our lives, those are being created off of these destructive cyclical operations that are going on.
Yeah, I can definitely see now how my whole life I projected externally some immensely painful experiences because I wasn't willing to go into that deep pain inside myself.
It's true. And so those cycles just persisted.
And they persisted.
And they will show you the movie version of them in your life.
And again, I believe, or it seems to be so far, that what we've seen and what I can look at is that this viral energy actually can take over you and take over people.
Oh yeah, right now I just go drive around one of these cities here, and they're on every corner. People talking to themselves, abusing themselves, destroying themselves. Sometimes they're claimed to be schizophrenic or whatever. And
more than that, though, look at the government.
Oh. Yeah, because we don't always just. I mean, that's a very sort of primitive way of manifesting this destructive code, is to just rip yourself apart, become an alcoholic, right? But you can project it out. You can just keep your repressed emotions repressed, and then you can just project them out, and then go to war with people, or create policies if you're in government or whatever that are destructive to people.
Like Monsanto, why would anybody want to work for that company? Why, why, when you understand?
Right, when you go to work for Monsanto,
they don't even eat their own food.
Right, and so if you're a scientist, you're working for Monsanto, you're not even eating the food, the GMO food there, but yet you're willing to work there. That isn't just you are in denial, it's that you are actually using that method as a way to project your destruction outwards.
Right, and the destructive forces are feeding off of that.
Right, that's right. Well, that's what we're finding. Okay, awesome. All right, great. So I guess this is one of a number of videos that we're going to make, and I wish they could be, really concise and just, perfect and all that, but the material is so complicated that it's going to take a number of videos. It's a process. But I guess people who are interested and who are watching this, if you'll watch the other videos that we'll post on viasforvirus.com, I think hopefully within several videos we'll be able to really explore all of our concepts. And if you want to join our conversation, please send us an email. If you have information that you think you've heard this and you think that we could use some of your information as we go on, you'll probably think of other people that you've either read or you've heard of that you think maybe they would be good people for us to talk to or to interview. If you're interested in the project in any way, just get in touch with us.
Yeah, we really feel like we're in this together, that it's up to all of us to really want to uncover this destructive nature and really understand it. we feel again that it's a very, very important undertaking. And we'd like you to be part of it on any level that
Yeah.
you can help us.
Yeah, any level. I mean, really, ultimately, we found that the more you get into the dark side of the universe, the more, whether it's this in the social holon, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in your family, wherever you're able to look at it, the more you look at it in one holon, the more easy it becomes to look at it in your personal self, because that's really where it's the hardest to look at. But really, at least so far, what we're finding is that there's really no way to have anything of a constructive, balanced society at all if people will not get in touch with their own destructive nature, get in touch with the repressed negative emotions, heal themselves, and then start to live in a way that is an effectively manages those emotions and that energy, which is a part of our life. It always will be.
Yes.
And so, the deeper you get into this, the probably you're going to find that it gets you into doing your own personal healing work. And that's really what it all comes down to, and what we want to be the end result of this work.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank
Okay,
you very
great.
much
Thanks.
for watching.
Okay, talk to you later.